Hello, this is just a quick video about me and a brief introduction. So my name is Dawn Murray and I am a marine biologist by training. I have a bachelor's in biology, a master's in marine science, and a PhD in ocean science. And I'm interested in global conservation, oceanography, climate change, ecology, and all environmental studies issues. My training began during my master's degree. I studied deep-sea jellyfish with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. This is while I was working at the aquarium in Monterey. And I studied these jellyfish, these Scyphomedusa, in the mesopelagic zone, so between 200 and 1,000 meters, with submersibles. And we were able to collect some data on these creatures and actually describe their habitat in that mesopelagic zone, something that had not really been described with that much detail before. Beautiful creatures, they're bioluminescent, so they glow with light, with beautiful bright colors. And people have hypothesized that this bioluminescence could be for interspecific communication. So that's occurring between different species for getting rid of predators. There's also a burglar alarm theory where they light up kind of around their bell, and maybe that's to get away a predator. And finding food and mates, they could attract food, maybe attract a mate to them, and of course lighting their way in the darkness. When I was done with my master's studying deep sea jellies, I decided to do something in the intertidal zone, and I wanted to look at some applied issue, which was in Santa Cruz, where I was doing my PhD. There was a lot of armoring of the coastline in the intertidal. So the intertidal zone is where the air, sea, and land intersect. There's a high diversity of species, lots of visitors. People collect organisms, animals, and plants in this area. There's a lot of pollution because of runoff from land. You can see a lot of climate change effects in the intertidal with distribution and abundance of animals and plants. And really, it's complicated to manage this changing environment. One of the things that most cities that are along the coastline do are they add boulders. They add boulders of different rock types to the intertidal. This is called armoring. These boulders sometimes are called riprap. This happens on the East Coast, the West Coast of the US, and really globally. So the theory is it's going to stop the waves from eroding the coastline even more by putting these boulders along the coastline. But this is a very big disruption in the ecological community because intertidal larvae are all floating out in the water column. And they're specific to what they want to settle on. So they don't settle on everything. And that's what I basically looked at. I looked at the settlement on different rock types and put out sandstone, basalt, slate, and granite blocks at 2 different sites and measured what recruited over 3 years. During this time, I was also a Sea Grant Fellow and created a citizen science program that monitors coastal ecosystems of California called Limpets. Limpets monitors the biology in the rocky intertidal and sandy beach ecosystems and aims to provide publicly accessible, scientific, sound, long-term data to inform marine science management and the scientific community. And I started taking students out to collect data every low tide and actually add it to the databases. And over the years, this has been what I love to do. I love to bring my students out to the field and have them collect data and do experiential learning projects. I started an environmental studies degree at Antioch, Santa Barbara with wonderful curriculum, have had many students go through that program. And I wanted to do some environmental justice work and partnered with the Tribal Trust Foundation, a nonprofit. And we were looking at the effects of debris that's washing up on the Yucatan Peninsula. So this was in Mexico. And you would not believe the debris that washes up on the beaches. So when I went down there, I noticed that in front of the resort towns in Tulum, they actually go out early in the morning, dig large holes, and put the trash down into the sand. And this was having effects on the turtles and them building their nests there. So I did a lot of work bringing awareness to this issue, focused on cruise ship dumping and dumping that came from runoff from land. And it's still a large problem, but I also ended up working with the Maya people while I was there, realizing that they have not been able to get to their beaches for quite some time because of all the tourism. So this morphed into work with indigenous people. And not only have I worked with the Maya in Tulum to get them access to the beach, but also the Amazon people. Tuntiak Katan has just recently been at the United Nations as an indigenous leader, talking about ecosystems collapsing around the world unless humanity listens to indigenous communities, because they have so much knowledge about how to take care of the environment. I was able to advocate for Indigenous Peoples Day with the Tribal Trust Foundation, and now in Santa Barbara County, we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day as opposed to Columbus Day. I worked with the local Chumash groups and also became very interested in studying and working abroad. So I taught abroad for 6 months at the Royal Thimphu College in Bhutan, teaching biodiversity and conservation management. Loved my students. I'm still in touch with them today. Really learned a lot about Himalayan ecology. And then went to the Galapagos. I brought students to the Galapagos. I have brought students to Bhutan. I've brought students to Costa Rica. And this is kind of my focus now in terms of experiential learning and doing research to try to get people to realize how connected we all are and how we all are in this together and need to make efforts to help each other. And climate awareness and resilience is extremely important to me. So that's just a little video, and I'm hoping that I meet you, and thanks for watching.